So, how is everyone enjoying the divide and conquer games being played right now? Because I'm not having a good time. Just keep in mind that this is not going to stay a regional conflict. Iran is claiming that they will enter the war if the bombing of Gaza does not stop, and all indications suggest it's not going to stop. Battles are ongoing at the Israel-Lebanon border, which signals that Hezbollah is going to make an official appearance, and yeah, that's a red flag, signaling that this war is going to expand to all the major players. For example, China is invested in this conflict via their military alliance with Russia and China, but also they are trying to undermine the US role on the global stage. Back in June, China established a strategic partnership with the Palestinian Authority. All of this is connected to China's campaign to gain political and economic influence in the Middle East, where it is competing with the US. China is obviously seeking energy resources and markets for its military and civilian exports, while also promoting its version of authoritarian government as part of a joint challenge with Russia to the Western-led quote-unquote democratic world order. Now, I had to put the quotes in because everyone can easily see that the West is not so democratic anymore, are they? Anyway, this has all the markings indicating that this is just the beginning of something much, much bigger. And just remember, military experts believe that World War is going to kick off sometime between 2025 and 2027. But hey, do you want some more proof of the Uniparty? Of course you do. Ah yes, a Democrat wants to bring back George W. Bush.
I could see President George W. Bush serving as Speaker of the House. He could come back and, and obviously I'm not a real fan of how the Iraq War went, but I would think that any reasonable Republican would be somebody that Democrats could work with if it was part of a system.
This should silence all the people who push back against the idea of the Uniparty. The Bushes, the Clintons, Obama, Biden, they all follow the same foreign policy agenda. And the entire world is going to be better off when these factions are finally out of politics for good. However, their desperation is pretty evident, isn't it? When they lay their heads down to sleep at night, surely they dream of death and destruction. So, anyway, back to it. Could the first family of the United States be financially implicated in the Middle East conflict? The answer appears to be yes. Yes, they are. And I quote, CEFC China Energy, where Hunter Biden served as quote-unquote managing director, brokered illegal weapons deals for Qatar and Libya. Yeah, illegal weapon deals. And if you forgot, Qatar is a key backer of Hamas, which has been frequently using weapons smuggled from Islamic groups in Libya. Yeah, this is all connected. The Bidens have personally invested and profited from damn near every foreign policy decision from the federal government. I've never seen anything like this. All of these companies weaken the U.S. position abroad and seem to directly hurt us domestically too. The president and his family are profiting from the destruction of the United States. We even got some new information about Hunter's business deal with a platform called ePlata, a digital wallet platform that's specifically used for migrants. By using this ePlata service, they can use worldwide banking services without a traditional ID or bank account. Now, this also raises concerns about the platform potentially being used for money laundering and other criminal activities, such as human trafficking. So, despite the darker possibilities and criminal activity associated with this, the point is that they have the financial incentive to push for mass migration. Yeah, they are personally profiting from the border and migrant crisis. Doesn't that make you feel good? Hunter Biden received wire transfers from ePlata, and on top of that, Joe Biden met with business partners of this venture at various dinner meetings too. Hunter even used Air Force Two to meet with investors in Mexico. The board of the company is full of Hunter Biden associates and Chinese government actors. And the main sticking point is that ePlata's expansion overlaps with the agenda of the World Economic Forum. Digital identity infrastructure worldwide. Once in effect, these systems have often laid the groundwork for the China-style social credit scoring systems and even medical passports. As I said, whatever is causing destruction and chaos to the United States, Hunter and Joe Biden are making money on it personally. They are directly profiting from the fall of the nation. Alright, let's try to find a way through the information minefield. We come back to this question quite a bit, and I can't help it. When we take a look at these disastrous political events, we tend to ask ourselves, is it ignorance or malice? The common advice is to apply Occam's razor. Basically, it's the simplest answer is more than likely correct, which tends to make people lean towards ignorance or pure idiocy for the reason for our problems. but I have a hard time accepting that. I tend to come back to Malice because of the lies. And I'm not sure if this is the best example, but their predictions when it comes to things like, climate change or anything like that, well, it always comes out as wrong. But that's simply because it's a lie. Simple as that. After years of psychologically harming generations of people, indoctrinating them to this death cult, this anti-human philosophy, well, Bill Gates finally admitted that this is all over-exaggerated, and I quote, "There's a lot of climate exaggeration," said Gates at a recent event. "The climate is not the end of the planet, so the planet is going to be fine, and no temperate country is going to become uninhabitable," end of quote. So, did you know that most of the top oil producers in the world are realigning under the BRICS system? And that the US dollar's foundation, the value of the dollar, is derived from fossil fuel markets. That's the reason why climate change narratives are touted as so important. It's not about the planet, it's about economics. Anyway, that's the reason they're so wrong about stuff like that. It's just a lie or an exaggeration to get the economic change that they need. However, their predictions when it comes to social chaos or war are usually pretty good. Not great, but pretty good. For example, in the Fortress World UN prediction, which came out in 2001, they predicted that a cultural revolution would happen around the world by the mid-2020s. And would you look at that? That's what we're dealing with. And it's stuff like that that triggers my conspiratorial side. There is just no way the people running policy, politicians, think tanks, Ivy League schools, etc. are all just simply delusional and moronic. Personally, I just do not know what to make of everything. For example, all of the chaos going on with universities, a lot of people are surprised at the levels of anti-Semitism, the levels of hate, and apparently are really surprised that these Marxist student organizations are supporting terrorism. At this point, how in the hell could you be surprised by any of this? Maybe people really are dumb. While protesting for Palestine, the students are running around chanting, "There's only one solution." And yeah, that sounds a lot like the final solution, doesn't it? But that's the thing. They may be using useful idiots to their advantage, but the people pushing this at the top levels, they know exactly what they're doing. No one should be surprised by protest organizations with this mentality when the founder of Black Lives Matter said this about Israel.
Actions always. The other thing I'll say is Palestine is our generation South Africa. And if we don't step up boldly and courageously to end the imperialist project that's called Israel, we're doomed.
And I quote, "An Israeli student was assaulted at Columbia. A Jewish student's dorm room was set on fire at Drexel University. A Stanford University professor separated students by Jews and non-Jews in class. Our institutions of higher education are alive with hate." End of quote. But the thing is that this has been happening since the 1960s. I do not know how this is surprising to people. The division has been systematically implemented as part of their course plans for years. For decades, really. What did people think would happen when you teach an entire generation to divide themselves into identity groups and disavow rational discourse? I mean, really. It was painfully obvious to most of us that, this was the direction we were heading. When your entire philosophy is rooted in divide and conquer, what did you expect? I mean, people cannot be this stupid. Oh, who could have seen this coming? Well, everyone should have, you freaking idiots. Anyway, keep in mind that this conflict is breaking people on all sides. Some guy became obsessed with the Middle East conflict and he murdered a 6-year-old Palestinian boy. I honestly don't think I've ever seen anything divide people to this degree. However, I do have another reason as to why I cannot accept that everyone is just stupid. Take a look at this right here, Henry Kissinger finally admitting that, and I quote, "It was a grave mistake to let in so many people of totally different cultures, religions, and concepts." It's interesting to hear them repudiate their life's work. Kissinger has been pushing mass migration for a long, long time. As if they didn't see this coming though, right? It seems kind of obvious. Multiculturalism without assimilation is obviously going to lead to this. You don't need to be Nostradamus to see this coming. The whole point of assimilation into US culture is the fact that we are all Americans, a common goal, a common moral framework, the rule of law. If you immigrate to the United States and become an American, well, that's it. You're one of us. That's how it's supposed to work. Okay, so we're going to move on to some other war stuff, but keep in mind the initial question. Is it ignorance or malice? So, with the Middle East kicking off, it looks like Ukraine is on the short list. John Kirby came out and said that funding is not going to be indefinite, which means they are changing focus. So, I don't know, but these are my thoughts. If the money stops, they might make a deal. John Kirby just said that it was coming at some point, and I don't know if we can trust that though. What are the chances that they stop funding Ukraine just because they know that the United States and NATO need to kickstart their own war machines, knowing that it's not the end, but rather just the beginning of something much, much bigger? And I don't know, I just feel like everyone's gearing up for World War. Now, in regard to this, I often wonder about how everything is going to be viewed in the history books, and I'm not sure exactly how to articulate what I mean. It's one continuous event. Let me explain a little bit more. Putin says, and I quote, "The expansion of the conflict in the Middle East may lead to serious consequences, including to the energy sector." So I do have a feeling that the consequences to the energy sector is kind of the whole point. The West, theoretically, needs the area to be engulfed in chaos as a way to deter the new trade routes with China, one belt, one road. And China, Russia, the Middle East, they're trying to undermine the Suez Canal trade lines. All of this is also wrapped up into the gas lines of Europe, which, by the way, is the main reason why the US establishment wants to start war with Iran. And you might remember that Iraq and Afghanistan surround Iran. During the Bush and Cheney years, that was actually the real target. And of course, Obama's actions in Syria were also about a pipeline. It is the same economic battle that we've always end up talking about. It's been going on for a long, long time. It's one continuous event. When all of this is viewed in the history books, they are going to be able to connect the dots a lot better than most of us can right now. We do have an issue when dealing with present change that keeps us from seeing the full picture. As things happen, initial instinct is to treat it as a singular event, rather than immediately seeing the full context. For example, we had George H.W. Bush in the first Gulf War entering Kuwait. George W. used 9/11 to go into nations that had nothing to do with it. Obama and the Clintons moving into Libya and Syria. Nord Stream, Ukraine, Iran, and China's One Belt, One Road. The global trade routes and the natural gas pipelines heading into Europe. It's all connected. It's all one event. One economic war and one future kinetic war. The Great Reset, the rising BRIC system. The West's new carbon-based system. The destabilization in South America. And of course, we cannot forget the global realignment to a multipolar world order. The chaos in Africa as they attempt to maintain their relations with Russia and China, the consequences of rejecting the West, cutting ties with France, all of this is related. I mean, we even have Ukrainian special forces fighting off in Sudan right now. I haven't found a concrete reason as to why, but the Wagner forces with Russia are currently roaming around Africa somewhere. The thing is that this is all about dictating global investment for the next 100 years. Who is going to be at the head of the table? The new economic order. Who is going to be directly dictating the direction of the human race? Because that is exactly what's at stake. If you control the global economy, you dictate the direction. Yes, that's right, a hand on the scale can really tip things one way or the other. Now, the technological aspect is where things start to get very, very weird. The fourth industrial revolution, the implementation of artificial intelligence, data learning, facial recognition, mass surveillance, the metaverse, transhumanism. What all of that means for warfare and human rights. It's a hell of a time to go through this economic change, because at the same time, we have to figure in the consequences of technological accelerationism. However, let's get back into some updates. A senior Hamas official, Ali Baraka, told Russia Today on Sunday that Hamas has been secretly planning the invasion of Israel for 2 years, which would mean that this came after President Joe Biden took office and after the disastrous, deadly U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. Yes, once those weapons were left in Afghanistan in the hands of terrorist groups, they all knew the game was on. So on top of that, we have a new report indicating that it's time for the United States to prepare for possible simultaneous wars against Russia and China by expanding its conventional forces, strengthening alliances, and enhancing its nuclear weapons modernization program. Yeah, so that's not good. Of course, this comes amid tensions with China over Taiwan and other issues and worsening frictions with Russia over its invasion of Ukraine and now the Middle East. However, we also have Janet Yellen and the usual ghouls are out here pushing this world war.
This is the most threatening and challenging geopolitical environment that I've ever seen. At the same time, the US is in its weakest fiscal position since World War II, with debt to GDP at 122%. Can America, can the West afford another war at this time?
I think the answer is absolutely. America can certainly afford to stand with Israel and to support Israel's military needs. And we also can and must support Ukraine in its struggle against Russia. And look, the American economy is doing extremely well.
Yes, it is perfectly reasonable for these people to assume that we can afford to fight everybody, apparently. And it is also a reasonable assumption for us to believe that they are preparing for a full multi-front war. The thing is, when Russia invaded Ukraine, the US military actually changed tactical training. They moved away from small special forces units, typically assigned for targeted raids, and decided that they needed to begin preparing for massive ground wars. Yes, they know what's coming. And I quote, "The United States and its allies must be ready to deter and defeat both adversaries simultaneously." And so, on top of that, our military is missing recruiting goals for 2023 almost entirely. Which means that all these pro-war college kids pushing the war in the Middle East and against Russia, well, they might be heading to the front lines at some point via a new draft. Now, I know. It does seem kind of improbable right now, but if World War III really breaks out, the draft is coming, no doubt about it. So, all these young kids are going to get, unfortunately, a heavy dose of reality in the future. I sincerely hope I'm wrong about that, but it's not looking good. Now in Ukraine, things are still getting worse and worse. Now a heads up, I'm going to screw up the pronunciations here, but just roll with it, as the encirclement of Avdiivka commences. Sorry about that. We can draw a few lessons from what we learned in the sieges of Mariupol and Bakhmut. First of all, advances will be slow. And so, on that note, I want to show you this clip from a battle in this area. I personally believe it's worth showing because of the imagery of the rockets going overhead, incoming rounds, and close-quarter combat within an urban setting. It's a pretty crazy video, so let's play it.
Считаю, я до конца дня 10 пидоров все-таки напиздую. Вперед, десептикон, блядь! 2-0. Дуже добре, прокидайте тут роботи железкою, гранатами. Давай, нашпіговуй туди. Настрій! Пацаны туда ГПшкой. Там? В доме напротив, пацаны! По левую сторону. Я одному в жбану в'їбав, другому в спину нахуярив. Понял, выбегаю, ебать, последний. И я так, понял, въебал один раз, не попал, перевожусь наперед, бам, в голову нахуй, 300. Добегаю туда, уже 200, ебать, понял. Ебать, от машин тупо нихуя не остается, нахуй.
Anyway, that brings us right back to the Middle East. And I'm pretty sure next time we're going to talk about Albert Pike's predictions for World War III. Because, interestingly enough, even the debunking raises some interesting questions. However, until then, once again, this is HelioWave. If you like the content, like, comment, and subscribe. Share the video if you want to. If you're in a position to, consider subscribing on Locals or Subscribestar. As always, make sure you disobey those true fascistas, and yes, I do hope you have a good night.